Turn to page 195 for informative explanatory writing at stage 11, focusing on making comparisons. We'll start on this page to show you that when we're at stage 11, we always begin with a question. Have the students use that question to take them to that deeper analysis. First, you would go over and see your compare stem. How is blank similar to blank? Explain why they have similar outcomes. That's your starting point, and from there you would formulate a question for your students to use to analyze the information so that they can write a stage 11 informative explanatory paper using comparison in that thinking process to analyze at a higher level. Let's go to the next 4 pages so you can see all the information I have in your manual for comparing 2 or more things at stage 11. On page 196, we begin with a checklist with 3 different categories: content and organization, sentences, mechanics. This checklist identifies what needs to be in a comparison piece of writing. So you can go through this, that your students have all those elements in their finished piece of work. Below that, what you will find is a box that displays an organizer for comparing information, my hand signs that will help students, aid students in understanding the process of comparing 2 or more things and filling in their organizer, and also a simple definition of what it means when you're comparing information for the purpose of analyzing it, and that is to show why 2 or more things have a similar outcome. On the facing page, I have the question displayed that was generated from the question stem, and that is, how are flowers similar to weeds? The students had read 2 articles that discussed flowers and weeds, and also they saw a video where an expert discussed the 2 different types of plants. After recording that information, understanding that information, and writing about it, we then went to the next level, and I asked the students, how are flowers similar to weeds? And here's the reason why we're going to do this analysis, to explain why both benefit people's lives. The outcome of comparing these 2 things, weeds and flowers, is to show that they both benefit people. That's why we're analyzing the 2. I generated this question. I know that the students already understood all the information. They had that knowledge under their belt, and we were ready to analyze it for a purpose of why do these 2 types of plants benefit people's lives. You will see below that a finished organizer from the lesson, as well as the published piece of writing. Let's go to the next page so that I can show you a chart as well as the teacher directions that you will follow to go through this lesson. On page 198, I have displayed here a chart for the students to see. Still have the same organizer where we have our introduction, our body, and our conclusion. And down below is a visual of our hand signals. And what do these hand signals do? They teach us how to fill in the body, what we need in the body and how to fill it in so that we know how to think when we're comparing 2 or more things. Let's learn the hand signal so we can remember how to compare 2 or more things, the steps our brain needs to go through to remember how to analyze 2 or more things to show their similarities. And our hand signal is attributes, compare, show the effect. Identify the attributes, compare, show the effects. On the facing page are the directions. These directions you could just use as the teacher where you're following them as you teach the lesson and you have them on one page, or you can also duplicate these and give them to students and have this as a resource chart for them to go to once they're working in partners or at that independent level of writing comparisons as a reminder of the steps that they go through in order to make a comparison. Notice step 1 is the introduction, the SS light bulb. So we're coming up with our big idea. We're using the question that was asked in order to form that big idea. And we're going to fill that in our introduction. Then we go to the body. We have to identify attributes, make comparisons to them, and then show the effect. And our hand signal helps us remember what we need to fill in and the order in which we fill it in. At the bottom, we have our conclusion. And then finally, the last step is the hook and snappy ending. You have your charts, you have your steps. For this lesson, just grab a blank sheet of paper, put it in the landscape position, and we will walk through a sample lesson using these steps to write a comparison paper about 2 or more things. We draw our 2 lines across our paper. Our top section is our introduction, middle's the body, and the bottom is for the conclusion. Step 1, introduction. What's the big idea? And we're going to use our SS light bulb. On our paper, we're writing our SS light bulb. Setting, time and place this information occurs. Subject, who or what are we talking about? Light bulb, what's the big idea? And why is it so important? We need to fill in our SS light bulb. Always go to the subject first. Who or what is this information about? We know it's about plants and weeds. What's the big idea? We're going to look at their similarities. And why? Why are we looking at them? Because their similarities show they benefit people's lives. Do I need a setting? I could talk about the setting is where these plants and weeds are, in gardens and lawns, or I could put an X and say, no, I really don't need the setting. This is the idea point where I'm putting the information down in the organizer. I'm not trying to say sentences yet. I'm just putting information down. So from our SS light bulb, we wrote down the information needed for the big idea, for our thesis statement. Our subject is weeds and flowers. We know that we are going to identify their similarities. Yes, they have differences, but we're looking at their similarities. Why? The whole reason why we're looking at the similarities is going to take us to the deep level of analysis. That is, their similarities explain why both of these types of plants benefit people's lives. Then I go back and I looked at, do we have a setting? When and where are these weeds and flowers? So I put lawns, gardens, every day. Doesn't mean I'm going to use that information. Sometimes I may just put an X there if I don't think it's needed at all. I recorded that there just in case I may use it at the beginning of my paper. All the ideas are down. I may go back and orally rehearse this information, or I may fill in all the ideas and then go back and rehearse the whole paper. You really need to identify the levels of language that your students have in your classroom. If you're working on their language abilities, then I would have them rehearse all the different sections of the organizer and constantly go back and review those sections over and over as you add new parts so they're developing their language in this process as well. Otherwise, we're going through and we're filling in with keywords and simple drawings the ideas, the information first. Then go back and orally rehearse the whole piece. We now have our introduction, our step 1, the big idea, the thesis statement. What is this whole paper about? And we know that it's about how weeds and flowers have similarities that benefit people's lives. Next, we're going to go into the body. What do we need to do in the body? Here comes our hand signs. We're going to identify attributes. What attributes are we identifying about weeds and flowers in order to show how the two benefit people's lives? So once we identify the attributes, then what will we do? Compare and then show the effect. Let's first of all identify the attributes. What attributes or characteristics do both of these types of plants have that benefit people? And as we went through our information, we saw that both can be used as medicines and both can be used as food. We looked at medicine and food. So how many attributes do we have? 2. We went and we put medicine and food on our organizer. We're going to go back and make sure that we are focused and on target. Are there weeds and flowers that can serve as medicine? Yes. Do they benefit people's lives? Yes. Okay. Let's look at food. Are there different types of weeds and flowers that can be food? Yes. Does that benefit people's lives? Yes. Food benefits people's lives. You need it to live. Identified the attributes and we put a finger down for each one. We have 2, put medicine and food. Once we identify the attributes, we need to show their similarities. We're going to make a T-graph to show the medicines and food of weeds and to show the medicines and food of flowers. Notice we made a T-graph. We put a picture of a weed and a picture of a flower. You could write weed or flower, whatever works best for you. When students are asking, should I draw it or should I write it, I always tell them, whichever one makes sense to you and whichever one you can record at a fast rate. because we are not writing out sentences. You're going to find keywords, 2 or 3 words that you can write down to represent your idea or draw a picture. No sentences and no art projects. Simple icons, keywords. That's what you're doing when you're putting your information down. So we made a T-graph. In this case, a picture of a weed, picture of a flower. Then we went below our weed and we said, what kind of medicines? Let's put all the information we know about weeds being a medicine that benefit people. So we talked about how many weeds have vitamins and minerals, they're bursting with them and they have healing powers. And then we talked about how they could be served as tea, herbs, and they can help your skin, your eyesight, your digestion. We listed the information about a weed being medicine and how it benefits people. We're going to do the same with a flower. We're going to talk about how a flower is a medicine and how it's used to benefit people. Down below, we have keywords, simple drawings representing that a flower is organic, natural. It can be used as a tea. For instance, rose petal tea can cleanse the blood. Honeysuckle can be used to decrease coughs and help with breathing. The next step is to draw our arrows to show the effect. So we identified the attributes, then we went to compare, and finally, after we compare, what are we going to do? Show the effect. So what's the effect of these 2, weeds and flowers being medicine? What's the effect of this similarity? How does this similarity show that they both benefit people's lives? Notice how I keep using the organizer to teach students how to think. This is all about thinking, so that they can not only think at high levels, but also use this thinking organizer to take them to writing. The effect of this information is that both are great medicine and both improve the health of people's lives. Next, we go to food. What do we need to do? We've already identified that as an attribute. What do we need to do now? We need to show how weeds are a food and how flowers can be a food. We make our T-graph and we'll compare the 2. Again, we have our T-graph, we have our weeds, we have our flowers, and for food, we've shown that many weeds can be edible veggies that you can have in a salad, in a side dish, and then we showed like a dandelion, which has an edible flower, and these sawtooth type of leaves on a dandelion are full of flavor, and they can be used in these side dishes or salads. And we also showed a chickweed, the green fuzzy leaves of a chickweed and the purple stems, and how they can be served raw or cooked for a vegetable. Let's look at what kind of foods flowers can be. We have our bright, colorful flowers can be dried, frozen, can turn into an oil. They're sweet, tangy, they could be savory, and you can use them in drinks, flavorful sauces, and we also gave an example of a common flower buds that we eat all the time, and that's broccoli. The flower buds. We have our flowers and we have our weeds, showing how both can be foods that benefit people's lives. We have our attribute food. We compared. What's next? Show the effect. How does the weed and the flower, how does that affect or benefit people's lives? Both are healthy diet choices. These benefit people's lives not because it's just food, but these are healthy types of food that provide people with healthy choices for their diet. We have our introduction, we have our body. Next, we're going to go to the conclusion. We're going to repeat the big idea, not the setting, just the subject and the light bulb, but use different words. Sometimes it's difficult to look at all the information in the thesis statement, the SS light bulb, and go down to the bottom of the paper and reword it. That's why we use S and light bulb. So we can break apart the thesis statement and try to see if we can come up with different words or phrases that's similar to the information in the beginning. We went to the subject, we have weeds and flowers there. We could say these types of plants, or we could say weeds and flowers again. You could repeat a little bit of what was up there in the beginning. That's fine. We also decided maybe we just want to say the similarities of these 2 types of plants. So we're going to take the word similar and we're going to put it in the subject. Then we went to the big idea. Benefit people, maybe we could say reveal how it improves the lives of people. So we looked at benefit and we just went improve people's lives. So that's how we go through and we try to look at different words and phrases up at the top and try to see if we can replace those different words or phrases or come up with a different way to say the same thing. That's why we learn synonyms. That's why we learn proper nouns, pronouns. Those are different words or phrases or methods in your brain that you can go to try to come up with a different way to say your conclusion. At this point, we have our entire organizer completed. We would go through and orally rehearse the entire organizer. Once we have that in place, then you can have your students go back and add a hook and a snappy ending on their paper, or on a separate sheet of paper, plan that out. Orally rehearse it and write their paper on weeds and flowers having similarities that benefit people's lives. Let's look at that finished piece of writing. On page 197, we have our question, students answered using the organizer, and down below is the finished piece of writing. And if we think about our stick person with our introduction, body, and conclusion, our first paragraph here is our introduction, and the bottom is the conclusion. So we have our intro, and we have our conclusion, and in the middle, that's our body. And notice we have our two main idea paragraphs in which we were talking about how plants and weeds can be medicines, and how plants and weeds can also be food for people. There's our parts of our essay about weeds and flowers. We had our hook, and then we had our thesis statement about weeds and flowers and how their similarities are beneficial to a healthy life. Next is the body, where we have medicines and food are those attributes that both have that benefit people's lives. Down at our conclusion, we're going to end with our conclusion sentence. These similarities of weeds and flowers reveal how both of these plants can improve people's lives. And then we have our snappy ending. In the next video, I will walk you through the steps to contrast two or more things.